Welcome to Mr. Hutchings History, where the past comes alive. Let's dive into today's story.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're diving into a pivotal moment in history today. The Potsdam Conference of 1945.
Yeah.
We're digging into some fascinating excerpts you've shared, all about how the U.S. and Soviet Union went from wartime allies to,
Well,
let's just say it wasn't exactly a clean breakup.
right.
Expert speaker,
Yeah.
the floor is yours. What makes Potsdam such a historical puzzle?
It's fascinating, isn't it? On the surface, you have these leaders meeting to finalize the war effort and plan for peace. But underneath, there's this incredible tension building. Potsdam is often considered the starting point of the Cold War, and these documents you've provided really expose why.
Yeah, and we're talking just a few months after the Yalta conference where the vibe seemed entirely different. You've shared some material from that period, too. What a contrast.
The shift in tone is striking. You see it in Truman's diary entries, his frustrations with Stalin, his suspicions about Soviet motives in Eastern Europe. In one entry, he writes, I can deal with Stalin. He is straightforward, but I cannot agree with his word.
So he could handle Stalin's directness, but didn't trust those promises. What does that tell us? It seems like Truman went into Potsdam already on edge.
Absolutely. Remember, Truman had only become president a few months prior after Roosevelt's death. He was less inclined to compromise, particularly when he saw Stalin backing communist governments in Eastern Europe. Truman saw it as a betrayal of the agreements made at Yalta, where Stalin had pledged to allow free and fair elections.
And those conflicting views on Eastern Europe weren't the only source of tension, right? You marked this excerpt about the atomic bomb. Pretty big factor to throw into the mix.
Yeah.
The timing is crucial. The U.S. successfully tests the first atomic bomb just days before Potsdam. While our sources suggest that Stalin was aware of the Manhattan Project through Soviet intelligence, the reality of a working bomb undoubtedly shifted his calculations.
How on one hand, Truman has this game-changing weapon, but he's also sitting across the table from Stalin, who's already expanding Soviet influence in Eastern Europe. Talk about a high-stakes meeting. What was the dynamic like between them, knowing what we know now?
You can almost feel the tension radiating from the transcripts of their meetings. It was a clash of personalities, ideologies, and national interests. Truman, emboldened by the atomic bomb, took a much firmer stance with Stalin than Roosevelt ever did.
It's like they were playing a game of chess, each leader making strategic moves and countermoves. But then Truman brings a whole new piece onto the board, the atomic bomb. Did he tell Stalin directly about the bomb at Potsdam?
Truman only alluded to having a powerful new weapon without going into specifics. There are differing opinions about how much this revelation factored into Stalin's immediate decisions. But what is clear from our sources is that Stalin recognized the significance of the bomb. It pushed him to accelerate the Soviet nuclear program. It became a race against time.
It's wild to think about that moment, the weight of what that weapon meant hanging in the air. Did Stalin's reaction, public or private, change the course of the conference?
Publicly, Stalin downplayed it. However, behind closed doors, it's a different story. In his memoirs, Vyacheslav Molotov, Stalin's foreign minister, recalls Stalin saying, the balance has been destroyed, we'll have to talk to them from a new position. It's clear that the bomb significantly impacted Stalin's thinking, especially when it came to Soviet security and future negotiations with the U.S.
That's a chilling statement. It really highlights the fear and uncertainty the bomb created. And this is all happening while they're trying to hammer out the future of post-war Europe.
Exactly. And the atomic bomb wasn't the only factor shifting the dynamics at Potsdam. Another key point you've highlighted in the material is the situation in the Pacific. Remember, at Yalta, Stalin had agreed to join the war against Japan once Germany was defeated.
Right, a united front all the way to the Pacific. But by Potsdam, the war in Europe is over, and the U.S. has a weapon capable of ending the Pacific War on its own.
Precisely, Truman even wrote in his diary about the atomic bomb. It is my opinion that the use of this barbarous weapon at Hiroshima and Nagasaki was of no material assistance in our war against Japan. He felt it was a diplomatic tool more than a military necessity. This, of course, had major implications for Stalin, who was expecting to play a role in shaping the post-war order in Asia.
So instead of a joint victory, it becomes clear that the U.S. is calling the shots and Stalin is left fuming. What impact did that have on the negotiations at Potsdam?
It further heightened the tensions. It fueled Stalin's sense of distrust towards the U.S., especially with Truman now holding all the cards, or at least the most powerful one. This is where we see the solidifying of those dividing lines that will define the Cold War. The U.S. and its allies on one side, the Soviet Union, and its sphere of influence on the other.
So with all this distrust, all this tension, did anything positive come out of Potsdam? Were there any agreements at all?
Despite the challenges, some agreements were reached. Germany, now occupied by the Allied powers, would be divided into 4 zones of occupation. There was also an agreement on war reparations, although the Soviets felt the terms were too lenient on Germany. Additionally, they agreed to establish the United Nations, intended as a forum for international cooperation.
Okay, so at least they attempted to find common ground on some issues, but even the UN designed to prevent future conflicts became another battleground for the US and USSR.
Absolutely. Looking back, it's clear that the agreements reached at Potsdam did little to address the fundamental mistrust that had taken root. The use of the atomic bomb, the power vacuum in Europe, and the clash of ideologies all cast a long shadow over the proceedings.
It's almost hard to believe how quickly the wartime alliance unraveled. Makes you think if we could rewind back to that conference table in Potsdam, knowing what we know now about the decades-long Cold War, what could have been done differently?
It's a question historians still gravel with. What if there had been more open dialogue, a deeper understanding of each other's security concerns? Was this clash inevitable, or could different choices have led to a different outcome?
You've given us a lot to consider here. The weight of the atomic bomb, the power struggles over post-war Europe, the clash of ideologies. It's no wonder Potsdam is seen as such a turning point.
It's a stark reminder that history is rarely black and white. Both sides arrived at Potsdam with their own experiences, their own fears, and their own visions for the future. The tragedy is that those visions seemed increasingly incompatible.
And for anyone listening who wants to understand the roots of the Cold War, this deep dive into Potsdam feels essential. It's not just about dates and treaties, it's about the human drama, the miscalculations, the weight of decisions made under immense pressure.
Precisely. These events, these decisions made in the wake of a devastating war, shaped the geopolitical landscape for decades. Understanding Potsdam is key to understanding the world we live in today.
And on that note, we hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity to explore even further. Keep asking questions, keep seeking out different perspectives, and keep diving deep into the past. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to Mr. Hutchings History. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.